Welcome back to the channel. This is Gary Singh. Today we're going to talk about a big potential move up for Bitcoin going into next week, potentially breaking all-time highs. The current all-time high is 69,000. As of this recording, we're sitting around 62.7, 62.8. And all that's required to break an all-time high is about 11 or a 12% move up, which is quite possible. And there's a few reasons for that. The first reason is related to Genesis. Genesis was a company that was in the business of lending and borrowing Bitcoin. They went bankrupt some time ago. And at the same time, they owned some shares in GBTC, about $1.4 billion worth. And so now they're going to be selling those shares if they have not already started so. Selling those shares in GBTC, using those proceeds to buy Bitcoin and then redistribute Bitcoin back to the creditors. It was speculated by the crypto community last week that Genesis had started dumping their shares in GBTC. And if we look at the charts, there seems like a very likely possibility. So the dumping in GBTC started the first trading day of the ETFs, which was January the 11th. You can see there was a dump of $95 million. That spiked up almost by a factor of 5 to $484 million on January the 12th. Then 594, 460, 582, 590. And this persisted for a good week and a half, almost 2 weeks. And then we started to see that the dumpage started to diminish. We came down to $255 million worth of shares dumped on January the 26th. And by the time February the 22nd rolled around, the number was down to $55 million of GBT shares dumped for that day. The following day was $44 million, and then $22 million worth on February the 26th. And at that point, it seemed like the dumping that was the end of it. But then all of a sudden on February the 27th, that spiked by a factor of almost 6, up to $125 million worth of GBTC shares dumped. That doubled almost to 216 the following day, and then more than doubled on February the 29th to $598 million worth of shares. And then on March the 1st, which was a Friday, the last trading day of the week, that number spiked up to $492 million worth. So looking at this unusual spike that started to occur on February the 26th, there is a strong possibility that that theory may be correct, that it was Genesis, in fact, dumping their shares in GBTC. But the interesting part is that the price remained steady between $61,000 and $62,000 for that period of 4 days. And that might be due to the fact that Genesis is planning on returning those Bitcoin to their creditors in kind. So they are not planning on returning a dollar amount. They're planning on returning the Bitcoins as they were lent out to them. And so that would mean that Genesis would have to take the cash proceeds of their sales of the GBTC shares and go on the market and repurchase those Bitcoins so that they can redistribute them in kind to their creditors. And that might be a reason why the price didn't fluctuate. It remained very steady between $61,000 and $62,000. And if you add up the numbers, you can see that 125 million plus 216, let me open up my calculator. 125 plus 216 plus 598 plus 492 amounts to about $1.4 billion worth of GBTC shares that were dumped in the past 4 trading days. And if we look at this headline over here, Genesis cleared to sell GBTC shares worth $1.3 billion. That seems too strong of a coincidence. It seems like that might be the case, that Genesis was in fact dumping those shares. Those numbers are very similar, 1.3 versus 1.4 billion dollars. The next topic we're going to discuss is the gold ETFs versus Bitcoin, and specifically the Bitcoin ETFs. As you know, Bitcoin has been referred to as digital gold, and the reason for that is that Bitcoin and gold share a lot of the same properties. They are assets that are very scarce, so they're also known as hard assets. They are assets that people lean on during tough economic times. They are assets that will protect their investors against fiscal irresponsibility by our policymakers. So looking at this chart here, which is titled Cumulative Flows in All Bitcoin Funds and Gold ETF Holdings, the x-axis is defined as a date range. The y-axis is representing the flows. This black line here is representing the gold ETF flows, and the blue line here represents the Bitcoin funds. This chart only goes up to April 2021, so it's not showing the effects of the Bitcoin ETF. But looking at this chart going back to January 2019, all the way up to roughly the end of 2020, you can see that the gold ETF inflows and the Bitcoin inflows went up relatively in the same amount. And then at some point at the end of 2020, the Bitcoin inflows outpaced the gold ETF inflows. In fact, the gold ETFs started to have an outflow, as you can see this line coming down. So the next chart we want to look at is taking into account the Bitcoin ETFs. It's a little more recent of a chart as compared to the previous chart. You can see this gold line here that is representing Bitcoin. This black line here is representing the outflows of gold. I found it very ironic that the line that's colored in gold is representing Bitcoin, whereas the line colored in black is representing gold. Maybe there's a subliminal message there that Bitcoin is the new gold. As you can see, when the Bitcoin ETFs launched, there was an immediate spike in the inflows into Bitcoin. As expected, it's a new asset class that is more than expected. But what's interesting is the fact that around the same time, the gold ETFs had a significant outflow. So this is very positive news for Bitcoin. So some of that money from gold ETFs is moving into Bitcoin ETFs, which is good for the price action of Bitcoin. The third thing that we want to talk about is the fact that the big customers of these Bitcoin ETFs still have not been onboarded. They are the wirehouses such as Wells Fargo, Merrill Lynch, UBS, Morgan Stanley. And so the recent news is that Merrill Lynch and Wells Fargo's wealth management division will be offering the Bitcoin ETFs to their clients upon request. There are rumors that UBS will be coming on board. And I also saw a tweet from Bitcoin Archive this morning that Morgan Stanley is also going to be giving access to the Bitcoin ETFs to their clients. So those are the big customers of Bitcoin ETFs, and they still have not been onboarded. And despite that, since the ETF launch, we're up about 50%. We started at around $43,000. We're trading around 62.5, 62.7 at the time of this recording. Once those clients start to onboard for the wirehouses, when the gold ETF customers, they start to dump their gold ETF in favor of Bitcoin ETFs, when the dumpage of GBTC shares finally is done with, you can see a big surge in the price of Bitcoin. And while I'm not a financial advisor, my personal opinion is that there's a strong possibility that we may break all-time highs next week. We're at 62.7, 62.8, somewhere around there at the time of the recording. And $69,000 is the all-time high. That's about 11, 12% from now. As we know, we've seen Bitcoin move that amount in a single day. I think we can do that in about a week. So all in all, really good setup for Bitcoin to move up. So that's the end of the video. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please like, share, comment, subscribe. That would be appreciated. See you in the next one.